We are going to get to a really, really interesting topic today, virtual editing, or editing from any, yeah, any long distance editing. Let's get right into it. Andrea, um, how long have you been working virtually, and what is like when you start to work with a director? And let's say it's not a director you've worked with before, but they've heard how great you are, and you've interviewed and you've been hired now and making gobs of money because editors make gobs of money. Um, what are what's your process when when you're about to begin with a director? How do you get the footage? Do you look at it together, separately? The notes that you take. I mean, let's start talking about that process. And we are recording. Okay, good.
Sure. Hi, I'm Andrea Lewis. I have been an editor for a long time, but I have been remote 5 years out of Salt Lake City. I lived in LA for probably 30 years before that. Um, and was able to do it because of the relationships that I have with the directors and producers that I've worked with a long time. And I think you have to have that trust. They have to know you and how you work and your work ethic in order to make it actually work. If you're with someone you don't know, you have to prove yourself in a way, which is just a lot of showing, a lot of sending cuts back and forth. All the notes are done in conversation, really, I think, or with time code notes, that type of thing. And it's really more of a conversation anyways, with me because I like to go into the footage and spend a lot of time in there and understand what the footage wants to say, what the film could be, because sometimes it could be two or three different types of films. So I think starting out with a real understanding of where the director wants to go and then finding that in the footage is the first step. So working remote, I have to say, as an editor, you work alone anyways, and you find all of that on your own. And then it's the conversation, hey, look what I saw, look what I found. And other people are looking at the footage as well, so you connect on those points. So
When you
for
say other people are looking at it, what do you I mean, I'm used to working just alone with the editor. You're talking about certain projects?
Yeah, if you, for instance, if we were working together and you wanted to have access to the footage, you could be looking at the footage at the same time and making your own selects or things you really like or pulling sound bites and all of that. And then we connect with those. You can send me those things. I can send you back how I would put them together, and it just goes back and forth.
Yeah.
So, and that happens all day long. Like that's, really, it's a little slower, obviously, because you're not in the room. But I think that if your communication is good, you can hit those notes just
Yeah.
as easily, just as well.
You make an important point about talking before. I mean, I think it's so important for the director and editor to have long conversations about what the film is about. What is the director trying to say with the film? I mean, I have pages of notes. I mean, always with the caveat that things will change in the edit room and these aren't set in stone. But I mean, I don't know. I think when the editor looks at the footage, they need to know what the themes of the film are and what it's trying to say so that when you see that footage, you know what to look for and to pick out. Because I think I think it's important to have footage that hits the themes without hitting it directly on the head, that kind of
Mhm.
illustrates the themes.
Sure.
Or maybe something that says it, but it doesn't sound like you're explaining it, you know, like people are stupid. Um, and I think it's important for the editor. if the director isn't being clear about what this is, it's important for them to ask, and to say, I don't understand, like, what are you, you know, what's the point of this film? Um, what's the story and where's the arc and all that sort of thing. So, another question or two, and then I'm going to start throwing it more open. But what platform are you using? When you say you're talking a lot, I mean, obviously we can talk on Zoom before everything begins, but once you start looking at the footage, what are, I mean, do you look at all the footage before you start pulling selects? Are you pulling selects while you're looking? Do you keep your notes on like whatever is, whether it's Premiere or Avid, or do you actually, you know, log it in a different manner?
I like to do everything all at the same time because that initial look is you have the freshest response. And even if you don't know where you're going, but if you know where you're going, at least you can pull sound bites, you can pull footage that you like, a look of something where you can set aside. I like this look. Maybe the whole film could have that. Color space or things like that. I do it all a bit simultaneously, so
Mhm.
I don't lose track of something I found. I do a lot of, I do my own selects. Sometimes I work with assistant editors that pull selects or producers pull selects, but I find, which is great, that you always have those. And I just think it's good to do it on your own so that you know all the footage. I
Yeah,
just think that's the number one thing. You have to know all of it really intimately.
sure. When you say, you want to have looks, I mean, do you create a separate like folder for looks,
Yeah, I mean, in bins and
cutaways, things
things.
like that?
I have bins of different sound bites or ideas or looks or color space that I like, and then I can create a sequence easily and share
I'm sorry,
those.
what do you title the folder of looks? Do you,
Well, I think every editor has their unique way of
uh,
labeling all those things. And when I pull good stuff, I like to call it nuggets. So that's my that's
gotcha.
my shorthand, or I'll do looks or just whatever pops into your mind that you'll be able to find really quickly.
So, well, since you're compiling as you go along, um, at what point are you sharing with the director? And how do you share it when they want to see it or see what you're doing? I mean, at what point are they even asking if you're just kind of, in a sense, organizing, logging and organizing?
Yeah, so it depends on the director, really, like how curious they are. But it can happen at any time, whenever you got to sink into the footage. You have to, I'd say a week. Depends on how much footage there is, how many,
Let's say
because
100 hours, which is actually in many cases small, but let's
yeah,
say
well,
100. Just
think about it, if you're working a 50-hour week, I would say 3 weeks to get through that footage if you're really doing everything pretty quickly and listening and reading transcripts, that there should be transcripts. The more tools you have up front, the faster it goes. So, sound sync, all of that in advance. Then when you pull those selects, it's already done. If things like that aren't done up front, then your editor's pulling selects and then they don't match sound sync, for example, that comes in later. So any kind of under the hood stuff ideally should come first. Of course, it doesn't always work that way. Um, but it just depends on how involved the director wants to be. A lot of times I get given, I've been really lucky to have a lot of rope up front and a lot of time to really sink in and get to know the footage.
yeah,
And I think if you allow your editor that time, they can bring to you new ideas and new ways of seeing it that maybe you haven't thought of.
What's interesting, I'll be very curious to hear other editors, talking about different ways than yours of approaching the footage. But I know once, I mean, look, the old school way for me was I've always worked with Maeve and other editors, we're in the same office, and we'll look at all the footage together and we'll take notes as we're watching. I mean, we'll each have our transcript books. And it's a very good sign when after you've watched an interview and you compare like what sound bites you like when you have the exact same in points and out points. Very encouraging. Also, anything that makes us laugh, we like make special notes. Sometimes we'll build whole scenes around a moment that we found really funny. But you know, I tend to like once we're on the same page and we've gone over this and talked it to get to death and kind of roughly, I mean, as best we can at the beginning, outline, with the old index cards. Then I like to let the editor go off and edit a couple of scenes, and then take a look at it. And it doesn't even matter where the scenes are. It's whatever scenes they want to get started on. So it's really interesting to hear you say how different your method is from what I'm used to. So I'm wrapping my mind around that, and how would I handle that? But I'll be curious if others have techniques that are more similar to what I'm used to. A lot of hands up, so I'll start calling on you. But Mark Weathers, I ahead of time, you were like the second ringer that we had here, knowing, I mean, I knew we'd have a lot of editors, but I also wanted to bring you on to talk because you're in the London, right? Um,
Yeah, I'm just outside of London. Yeah, and
yeah.
I was gonna agree with you about, you've got to get to know the emotional North Star of the project. And I find you've got to have that, as you were saying, have that chat beforehand with the director, whoever's making it, and not just find out about the project, but get to know each other. I think that's really important. Really get inside that person's head and they get inside your head.
Mhm.
Because it can be really important down the line when you're going backwards and forwards with different things. So having that early meeting and or meetings, however long it takes to really discuss the project, the themes, the emotional themes in the project, the narrative, until you're really familiar with it. And you were asking a question about, certain cuts filling out and things like that. One thing I do, I don't know about the other editors, but I send time, I print a time code on the footage I'm sending to the person. So we've got a common reference point, so
Yeah.
instead of them going, oh, this bit here and that, you just refer to the time code point, even ask them for an in and out point, and it gets really tight that way. And most editors worth their salt should be able to take that precise information and get what you mean generally in the whole structure of that scene. All right, so that's one thing I do. I always ask the whoever's making the film to, do you know your in and out points? Do you know exactly where you want things to go? They might have an idea, and we can start there by bulking it out that way, and then using my expertise to do that, do things that way. And someone is asking in the comments about, do you receiving footage. I like to receive footage by FedEx in the UK if someone's sending me footage or something, or by courier. So I've got it on hard drive and I can look at it and have a copy of that footage. So they make a copy of their original footage and send it by FedEx. Then I can start working it straight away and then create a time code from that. That's what I've done in the past.
Do you have preferred drives? I mean, these little Samsung 4 terabyte drives are so great. They're so light and small. I think the SSD drive is really good for it. But uh,
I haven't used them yet, but I've heard they're really good. I take any hard drive that's solid. I normally suggest I normally suggest that if we're going to do semi footage, buy a brand new hard drive that's fresh, format it so we know it's good, and then do things that way. But those SSDs are really good for editors for their kind of, you know, scratch work and things
Right.
like that.
So initially, you and the director have the exact same hard drives, you know, everything organized the same way on it, or do
What
you, when you reorganize it, how do they get your reorganized footage? You just
Well,
send them.
what I've done in the past, so they've kept their original footage and they store that away, and then I've just got all the files and I organize it however, and then from there, then I'm sending you, you know, I have my timeline, and then I have exports which I might send to you or send by Frame.io. I don't really get involved in the organization that you might have on your hard drive
Right,
with your files, but that's just the way I've worked. But if you've
right. So the
worked
project file will have your organization on
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Timeline, all that kind of stuff. And I would have organized the project files in a certain way on the hard drive and the clips and things like that.
Do any directors that you've worked with dick around with your organization when you send them? I mean,
No, no, I've not had that, and I would be quite assertive, not in a negative way, but I would say, well, we need to agree on whatever it is because we need a clear way of working. So if there's any dicking around, I'd speak up and say, okay, what's the situation on how we're working because we need to have a clear thing here, you know?
so how, when you come up with uh, a scene or anything you've cut, you just deal with it by sending them the project file that they'll
What I
open.
do is I send them, I export it and I send that clip or use Frame.io, whatever the review system, or send them that clip some way by Google Drive. They'll have a time code on there and then they can review it, discuss
Yeah,
it, email me, or we have another call for the major changes.
yeah. I'd love to hear from editors in the chat whether, you know, Frame.io is the platform they most prefer. I mean, it's the one I keep hearing about and I've used, and it's nice. But if there are other ones that people really like, it would be good to hear about that.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mark. We'll
No,
we'll hopefully get back to you, but there's a lot of hands up, so I want
And
to. Yeah.
Doug, I'll just read something in particular in the chat. Can you ask Doug to address the tech aspects of long distance editing, such as internet bandwidth, providers, systems, how footage is shared, etc. Also, what mechanisms are used to pay people across international boundaries.
Oh,
And
good.
also, and
Good
also, we
question.
invite everybody to use the chat today. Throw in your 2 cents, even if you just have a little tip. Like, we love a busy chat.
Holly, you're up.
I'm really just listening because I'm just at the very beginning of developing a new project. And a lot of my questions have to do with international co-productions. If anybody wants to talk about possibly working with an American filmmaker.
Look, put that in the chat, Holly, because I
Okay,
really want to keep this on the
yeah,
technical stuff. But if you
Jeff,
have a question, you know what? Here's a good question. You're perfect because you haven't done this before and you haven't. What do you have like a concern or question about what virtual editing would be like, given that you're not really.
I have edited virtually quite a
Okay,
bit, but in the US, and
that's
it was
okay.
not a co-production.
Okay, anything you want to like, you know, what's a takeaway that you come from, well, like a piece of advice you'd give others if they were approaching editing virtually?
uh, have faith in yourself that you will be able to communicate well with the editor. Like, don't give up, but get to know each other, learn how you each communicate. It probably at the beginning it will be a bit different, and find each other and cooperate.
Great. Thanks, Holly. Christine.
Yeah, hi, thank you. So I'm the director, and I was with my editor in person yesterday. We do that occasionally. We're sort of in a writing mode right now. I mean, we're sort of brainstorming, like you said, in terms of getting to know each other. So we both have boards in our respective spaces. That's mine. That's his, but they're static when they stay the same. Is there a way that, do you ever have there's Google Docs, there's Google Sheets. are there Google boards where you can collaboratively both work on them without, and so be able to make changes in where a scene might be in real time?
So you're talking about like a program or app or something that's the equivalent of like the index cards on the wall, that you
Right,
keep
where it's like
around.
if we're working remotely, where it could be like, oh, here's this, or just so there might be a comment where it says, just so you know, I changed this,
Right.
just to make it.
Anybody want to answer that? I mean, just raise your, okay, Shelley.
I've used a program called Milanote, and I find that it's really good. It kind of really lets you lay out a board just like you would a storyboard or notes like what you're talking about. But it also has a thing on the side where you can put things that you want in somewhere later that then you can draw from.
So I noticed other suggestions though in there. Does somebody else want to come up and talk about another program
I'll
that does a similar
I'll
thing?
pipe in.
Sure.
Um, just because I like this one best because it's free 99.
Ooh,
It costs $0, but everybody has to be on a Mac.
okay. And what is
Uh,
it?
and it's called Freeform, and it's already on your Mac.
Ooh, we like that.
It's built into your OS. You can look at it on your phone if you're in the field and you're like, "What did we say? You wanted me to pick up while I was out today." And it's just basically anything you want to Google. The the terms you're looking for is virtual whiteboard, and all of the, like there are just so many options for virtual whiteboards, but I like Freeform because I like free.
So yeah, and Freeform does more than it sounds like it does more than Miro boards in a way. So you're like,
Well, it's just a plain old whiteboard. So
okay,
it's got all the same things, but it's what I like about it too is it's very intuitive. I have I I have a tendency to work with clients who are a little bit tech averse, and um, which is funny because I'm so the opposite. Like I could go deep, but I like things that are monkey simple. Like if you put it in a cage with a primate, would they be able to figure out what it does just based on the pictures that it shows you? And so my vote will always be freeform if you have that option.
throwing this out there to anyone, what is the best way of handling transcripts virtually? I know the old-fashioned way, we would like get them transcribed and printed, and they would have. I have these notebooks that
Every
are
I'm going to throw this one out again.
sure.
Every major editing software, DaVinci, Premiere, Avid, all of them contain an auto transcribe feature now.
And also, like any transcript, you don't know exactly what their expressions are when they're saying it. You don't know how much of a pause there might be, or, for the in point or out point and stuff. So still a lot of work to be done there. But that's a really good use of an AE, isn't it? To
It
go
sure
through.
is.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, it's a good question to throw out, maybe for the chat, or maybe somebody wants to come on camera, is how to best you work with an assistant editor to make this all flow better. Um, anyway, thanks, Joy. Gary. Yeah.
Yeah, hi. Not a whiteboard comment, but a virtual editing room comment. I used Evercast and Looper, which kind of gives you the ability to share. Excuse me, but I just came from the dentist. um, Gives you the ability to share your edit room virtually with your producer, so you can physically share your timeline, go through and edit virtually, and have conversations about your cut. I've done this twice over the last several years,
What
and
were,
it worked
tell
great.
me what those were again.
Evercast is one, and Looper is one that I used in a couple of years ago, And I think Looper might be free now. It was like $100 a year back then, but it might be free.
Can you put those in the chat?
I will
And again,
try.
explain what they are, not just the names.
Yes, I
Yeah.
will. I will do that. And in terms of virtual editing, just two quick stories. When I worked at NBC News Productions, when the pandemic struck, and for about a year or so before then, all the editors were saying, "Can't we work remotely?" And they would say, "No, there's, blockaded footage. You can't have this. You can't share that." The pandemic hit. 2 weeks later, we all had edit systems at our homes. So it happened. So I think that when things need to happen, they happen. And the other story, I did a documentary called Amen, 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 a story for our times, which I shared on the D Word on my profile. And that started out before the pandemic, and the pandemic hit, and they couldn't finish the shoots. They couldn't do anything. So I came in with that. They sent me all the drives, and I'm with Mark. I like to receive the drives via FedEx and have the hard drives and then share it back with the producers so they, see where I am. And then using Evercast, I was able to share timelines. But that whole project turned into a virtual project by virtue of necessity. And we went on to win awards all over the world in film festivals. So it was really a project that was about to just fold in on itself. And we used virtual editing to get it done and virtual producing. And it was a mess. I have to say that it was like learning on the fly and saying, well, how are we going to do this? And then just figuring it out as we went. And took a lot longer than we had scheduled or budgeted, but we got it done and it did very well.
Great. Thanks, Gary.
For 2 cents.
And thanks for braving it out after your dental work. We heard everything you said. Elliot, is that how we pronounce your name?
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
So this is a really fabulous conversation because I'm right inside of everything that you're all talking about. Basically, I'm in Seattle, my editor's in San Diego, and I have an assistant editor who I'm mostly working with the main editor, but and we're still negotiating roles and stuff. But what I had him do, we had a meeting with the three of us in the beginning, and we figured out, it's like I've been working on my film for 17 years, so I just kept on stacking in my file system. It was like chronological, but then we figured out we needed to restructure based on character and like all this file organization. So I decided to have my assistant editor actually reorganize all the footage in the Finder and then rebuild the project and relink everything so that we could kind of start fresh with this team instead of just everything being inside my head and I know where everything is. So that's been really helpful. And my editor has just finished like going through all the footage and I have some rough cuts. So also the comments about kind of, like I've already reviewed all the footage as the director. I've already worked on edits of it and stuff. And this is the point where I need somebody else to do it so that it can actually be the best version of the film that it can be. But it's we're talking right now about like this transcription, and I appreciate the comments of getting it maybe from Premiere. I'm still debating which platform to use because I have found that you have to go through and edit quite a bit, and then what's the most time effective thing. And we have the small solid state drives that we're shuttling because I just did a pickup shoot. And then so me, my assistant editor, and the editor all have the same file system on 3 backup drives in 3 locations. And then we can shuttle hard drives to get that stuff done. We're also looking at hosting the project file from Premiere on it's Lucid, like one of the an online server platform, and using Premiere Pro Productions as a way to kind of do live editing. But I also like the idea of just kind of like screen sharing and doing whiteboard stuff because it's, it's like I don't want to do something that's so technically complicated that then we're spending so much energy on that, like learning a whole new system. So anyway, so that's something that I'm curious to know more about, like how multiple people can like work on an edit. Like if I wanted, even like sync the audio for my editor so that that saves her time and stuff. Like things like that would be helpful to get feedback on from other
Yeah,
people.
that's great. It raises the question, what you're saying, like how do editors handle, like, I mean, it's one thing to send the hard drive over initially so that you have the footage, but what if the director is shooting more footage as you're going along? What's the best way for them to get this additional footage to you? They're not going to send the whole hard drive, obviously. You know, um, what platform do they use? I mean, what, so you can throw those in the chat, or if anybody wants to come up on
Well,
camera.
Doug, can I just respond really
Yeah,
quick? So
sure.
we have these solid state drives and they're like little tiny baby, right? But it's, it's
Yeah.
significant amount. And what my assistant editor did was we had one drive, whatever, that didn't everything didn't fit on one drive and I was putting on another one. So in the Finder system, he named the folder like move to and then put the direction of like all the different folder file systems it needed to go into. So we still all three have the same structure. And when anybody, so I put it in my folder system, and then with all the different files, I kind of pre-organized it. So it's like move to footage, to group shots, to this interview, and then to audio or video. And so all the files and then it gets passed around and everybody manually updates and downloads it that way. So it's not 100% foolproof, but just I think mailing hard drives when there's new footage is if you have a good way to communicate, and so it can all stay the same system, that can work.
Yeah. If anybody knows, platforms, anything where you move footage, that'd be good to have in the chat. It's interesting you say that. It sounds like it's important for you, all three of you people, to have the same organizing structure. Someone earlier said it didn't matter so much. Maybe it was Mark, I forget. Um,
Well, because I want to actively be involved in like being able to edit with, you know what I mean?
you're
And
gonna edit.
well, I want to be able to look at stuff and be able to like pull out sequences for like social media because I'm working with an intern team. Like I also need to have access to it. And if we're talking about things that are in different places, like, and also, I've been told by editors, like, you should have 3 backups and have them all in different locations. So that also serves that purpose. So and I have another backup that's all the old version of how I used to have it. So
Right.
anyways, a lot of backups. So.
Yes. And Google and Microsoft, they all have versions of it too. They have your life. Um, anyway, thanks for sharing that, Elliot. Yeah. And by the way, everybody chip in, like if questions come up and you have something to say about it, don't
Yeah,
worry about the raised hand. Mabel, you seem to want to talk about this.
yeah, I was going to talk about something else, but now about this. Just for the transcript very quickly, but before I go into this, yeah, I mean, like I use Premiere for the AI function for the transcript, but honestly, as Joyce said, it's racist, and we have dialects even in English where it just changed everything. And if you're working with different ethnicities within the US in English spoken and everything, it's just not. So I really make the case to my teams. Some teams sometimes they will go for it or not. I just have to do it in whatever ends up being. But at the end of the day, sometimes a transcript service, even like Rep, which is very affordable, I think now you may have the AI Rep version, but also the person Rep version, which is better and is more curated. Because if you have a assistant editor for the whole duration of the film, that's good. But oftentimes with in the budgets, assistant editors come and go. They just come for certain moments, right? Like, okay, there's a bunch of footage now, and we're going to organize this footage. And so, but then you get more of this transcript situation. And then I find that the premiere, going back to look at the transcript, you have to be in the transcript mode, but then if you want to be in the edit mode, it's different, and you don't see that unless Joy knows a trick for it. And so then I go back to my Google Doc to see that, you know what I mean? It's cumbersome. Anyway, so I end up printing actually a lot of that. And okay, so that's about the transcripts. Now, the question was how to share collaboratively with different people in the team. And I had this with a couple of projects, and where, first of all, I don't know if the latest person, forgot her name, was talking here in the chat, I mean on screen, is using productions. But if you're using productions, I'm the editor using productions, and my assistant editors is using the same productions I have. Basically, the assistant editor or somebody else, or even me, can create this individual project, but it's not a project outside of productions. It's a project that will be created within their copy of productions. And once is synced and organized with the proxies or no proxies, however, you're using your workflow, that individual project that is inside the big production folder is sent to me, and then I bring it inside the productions, like I imported it, and then if it's done right, everything should come. If it's done right, meaning like my individual project should only have my timeline, let's say my sync timeline with the sync material, nothing else, not footage in that particular project, because there is another project in productions that is a footage project, and that's where all my footage is. So they are sort of like two different things that connect together at the end of the day, if it makes sense. Yeah, that's what I want to mention.
Thanks, Mabel. That was helpful. Two things. You mentioned proxies. We don't have to go on camera for this, but if anybody in the chat wants to explain why they use what's the importance of proxies? Do they use them or do they not? I hear both things from editors, that it's not needed. So what determines why you would make proxies? Also, you mentioned Rev, and I think it's great. I mean, it's not cheap. I mean, it tends to be what, $100 for like an hour-long interview, a 90-minute interview, something like that. But what I like about it is they give you the audio alongside it, so that when you see a soundbite that looks good, you can actually hear how they're saying it, and that's invaluable as a director, hearing, looking at the transcription, to be able to hear that right as I'm reading it. But anyway, Gil, Eric, and Mark.
So Shelley, to maybe to facilitate, because there's always you're essentially with two people's perspectives. We're all artists, we're all we all work differently. So I find that, especially if I'm working with somebody new, and we can exchange information, I get scripts, and all kinds of direction. But if it's a real quick shorthand is just to send your editor some references, some films you like, some scenes that you're really into. I mean, if you can find them other sizzle reels that you're really into. And at least, they'll get a sense outside of just like a descriptive or maybe a verbal conversation. They'll get a sense of what you're actually looking for. It's never going to be exactly what you're looking for. So there's a process, you've got to go back and forth and hammer things out, because this is the most collaborative art form ever. So, but yeah, I find that that's like a good shorthand. I always ask for references. If I don't get them, I still ask for them because I'm like, even if otherwise I'm going to come up with my own interpretation. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I can go into a whole long thing about how I hire the editor or whatever. I go through a long process of interviewing. I get recommendations. If I, ask everybody I know for recommendations, if they, a name shows up more than once, they go to the top of my spreadsheet. I love interviewing editors. It's like really great part of the process because I have like a 10, 8, 10, 12 minute work in progress sample. I love seeing how they react. This is where being in person is so helpful for those first meetings and seeing how they react to your sample. I'm positioning myself so I'm half seeing the screen and half seeing them in profile. I literally had one editor, very well accomplished and award-winning editor who was interviewing for one of my films. And like I said before, humor is very important. There was lots of moments of that in the sample, I thought. And she just watched it stone-faced and then turned to me afterwards and said, "That was really funny." And that interview did not last long. Anyway, I digress. Eric, you're up.
Yeah, that's hilarious. Talk to me like I'm 10.
Yeah, talk to
Shoot,
me
I
like
think
yeah.
communication, you know, having the editor be able to get in your head, is, uh, yeah,
That's a scary place to
there's no
be.
such thing as over communicating.
Being in my head is a really scary place to be.
And I've been so I have a lead editor on a feature-length documentary that we're currently working on, and we're getting close to a rough cut. But in the beginning, I was using language that I had assumed that he was aware of. Like we had the same definitions of terms in the space, and he would interpret things completely different. And I think what the biggest lesson for me was having an agreement versus an expectation. And the expectation that he's going to deliver exactly as I'm communicating versus actually having the formal written agreement, which sounds not creative and but it protects everyone. It protects your resources. It protects your budget, and it puts safeguards in place if you need to pivot. And yeah, I ended up way over budget because of misinterpretations of things that I would communicate. And that rapidly became a problem. And so we had to go back to the beginning, and I said, hey, like for example, when I said, hey, we need a rough cut, like an assembly cut, and when I was saying rough cut, in his mind, he's thinking a complete cut with B-roll and audio and all the more of kind of a, maybe not a final picture lock, but more of a final cut. And yeah, I think communication is key, and understanding what you're communicating and how it's being communicated.
That is the running theme of the day, I would say. Thanks, Eric. Gil did something I wish I'd asked you guys to do at the very beginning. When he named himself or renamed himself, he put Gil Seltzer, editor, and then his place. I just renamed myself director. Particularly if you're in gallery view, it would be, I mean, and for people watching the recording, it's good to get a sense that you're an editor or you're a director or both. A lot of director editors out there. So let's see, Cecilia, you're up.
Going on that.
I'll get to you, Mark. Oh, sorry. Actually, Cecilia, I promised Mark earlier, and he's waving his hands excitedly.
This is crazy, all this information. I'm a one-man band producer, so I shoot, I edit, I do everything myself.
How do you work with yourself virtually, Mark?
Huh?
How do you work with yourself virtually or otherwise?
Virtually?
Yeah, never mind.
Never. It was a joke. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Bad one, but yeah.
But I just can't imagine what everyone is saying on this, on delivering on these, especially international. It's crazy. So here's a project for the D word. I'd like to see on your YouTube channel a video on the best approach to do this kind of stuff, because this is great information. And I think first time doc editors really, or producers really need this stuff. And I just noticed on D word, you don't have your YouTube channel visible, right? Is that only if you're a member?
The latest recordings, if you go to the homepage, the latest 4 or 5 recordings all show up at the bottom of the screen.
And since I've been with D word for a couple years now, maybe and the YouTube is great. I think it was such a great addition to what you've done. But I would like to see some how-to videos on there. Proper lighting, proper audio, just little videos that help producers and first-time filmmakers on how to achieve good technical quality.
I'll answer that very quickly, Mark. There's so many on YouTube out there. I don't think the D word.
Yeah.
We don't have the capacity. We don't have how we have the brain power to even be doing these things is.
But it might be an in-house project type of thing within our membership.
Well,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and people are free to do it for sure. But in a way, I think this kind of thing is more helpful in that there are so many different approaches.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to go to an editor and say, this is the way to do it.
Yeah.
It's the way they do it. We've already heard that there are so many different
approaches. So many.
And nothing is
very good, though.
There's no right way. It's just what's the editor comfortable? What system do they work on?
But there is an efficient way to do it across the boards now that we are all on digital workstations. So I don't know. I think education is really important for us. I've been doing this a long time, and this blows my mind to listen to how you guys are trying to get footage to people and try to edit together.
Well, we have mind-blowing filmmakers and editors here, Mark. That's very good. Anyway, thank you very much.
Okay.
And now Cecilia.
Thanks. My question's on notes. I work remotely, and I have worked in person and every combination in between. I love working remotely. I think it's the most productive way for an editor to work, except for when it comes to notes. I noticed that the notes you get when you send something, even if you have the time code and all the information, source code, all the information you can add to it, there's very different than, Doug, as you mentioned, when you're in the room and you're just watching the reaction. That first initial gut reaction to a cut gives you a different kind of conversation, different type of notes that
Absolutely.
I find more helpful than getting a detailed time code. This time code do this time code do that, or if this is not working, this is working. I've tried having this combination where I'll have the director, or in the one case I'm working with now, multiple directors watch it together, the three of us online, because we can't be in the same room,
Right.
just to be able to get that gut feeling. Don't overthink it. How does your gut react to this scene?
It's a great thing, Cecilia. What do you use? What platform? Are you on Zoom doing it or what?
No, we could do it on Zoom. By sharing screen. I have done it when I was working at GBH. We had Sony C and Jump, and that had a lot of great tools for that. So you could actually watch that at the same time. But I noticed that and I think it's because of the years of working remote, there's this feeling, there's this reluctance, and it's not just with the directors that I'm working on now, the reluctance from directors and producers to just say, this is their gut reaction. Like they feel like they have to have organized, detailed, professional notes instead of just reacting. They have to practice their notes. They have to have time to think about the edit and write specific,
Not me.
that kind of like discussion that you can have in person where you can go back and forth, ask questions, because it's always about the notes behind the notes.
Okay.
And you can't get that on paper. And who has found a solution for that? How a way to negotiate that?
That's a great question for the chat as well. I want to just jump in with one tip that was really helpful when I was editing working with Maeve remotely on this doc I mentioned. I'd say we had about 50 hours of interview, and we had so little time budgeted to do it, and I was like, how can I reduce the time? And so the assistant editor used Premiere Translate, whatever that thing is, the translation thing in Premiere, and I got them on a Google Drive document. They had the time code numbers and it all laid out, and oh my God, the transcripts were stupid. But I'd shot it all, so I kind of knew the material fairly well. So I would highlight in this document the bites that I thought were good in red, possible bites. And within that, I then went back and the bites that I thought were really good, whether they were funny, whatever it was, they were like I highlighted in bold. So, and then the assistant editor took that and she put all the interview footage on video one, V1. She took all of the red things and put it on V2, and all of my bolded red things were on V3. And Maeve, in looking at the foot, never looked at anything on V1. It was just there in case, like she wanted to extend a bite or something, and it saved her. We probably got that 50 hours down to about 7 or 8 that she was even considering. So just a tip that worked really, really well for us. Doesn't apply to every film, but it was a real time saver. Sarah, you're up. We'll go a little bit over. We're getting close to the end, but if you guys want to hang in a little bit after 1:30, we are fine. There seems to be a lot of hands up.
I just wanted to go back to transcription because I use that a lot, and working with various people that as far for me using online platforms for transcription, for me, number one is which one is the most accurate, because I've used ones that had so many mistakes that it would have taken me, it would have been faster to do it myself. And I really love rev.com. I find them very accurate, and they've gotten more accurate. And I mostly work with interviews where people have a heavy accent, and it still does well. And I find that now they have AI, so it's cheaper, but also one way if you have a ton all at once and you want to get them transcribed, if you get a subscription and you can cancel it by the month. So get them all done in that month and then just pay that subscription amount. And then what I'm doing right now with a client who's not a filmmaker, and so is putting one of those copies into Google Docs, and that way we can make one thing that's worked really well for me for years is making color coded highlights. So we're both on the same page, and maybe there's 6 themes, color coded highlights, and then another code for like what people are saying, the nuggets. And then I also love that on Google Docs, you can write notes to each other, questions, suggestions, thoughts like that. And then that way it's live. And then one other thing I'll mention, because people are talking about costs for sharing files online, is that I just pay a little bit more to have more Google Drive space. And I find that to be the most affordable thing I've used.
Great.
And I get tons of space on there. So I keep everything between my clients on Google Drive that way. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
Great suggestion, Sarah, really. And this may be just me, but I put like jokes and banter in the thing. I mean, I just think to be on the same, sense of humor is so important for me and a collaborator. I mean, even more so when we were working together, in the same room. I want somebody who thinks my jokes are funny, and my footage is funny, and it's a way of like keeping it lighter, as you go along through the process. I just think, whenever you can kind of add that, it's really helpful. It doesn't, it feels like it's taking pressure off the editor. And I don't know, it just makes it more fun for me. God, if a work collaboration isn't fun, why are we in this? It's not because we're making so much money. It's not like we're making fame or fortune or anything. So, you want to, 2 things out of it. You want to have a good time doing it, and you want to feel like you made the film you set out to make at the end of the day. Because what you can't control is the reaction to it. So, Larry, you're up.
Okay, so we are shooting all kinds of short documentaries about climate change solutions and innovation for a series that we're doing for PBS called 50 States of Sustainability. And we have shot 40 short films in the past 3.5 years and edited 40 short films. Everybody is a freelance editor. The supervising editor is remote. The graphics people are remote. And I am sort of functioning in terms of file management. I'm functioning kind of like an assistant editor because we have a very small team. So I put this in the chat, but I've been using a utility called Blip, which it's blip.net. And I had been using Massive. I had been paying for extra space on the Google Drive. WeTransfer, used all these kinds of things.
Larry, let me butt in. Blip is what? Because I didn't see the chat.
It's a file transfer utility. So the media is not going to the cloud. That's a caveat about this. The media is not going to the cloud that can then be downloaded. Both computers need to be on. Both computers need to have this Blip utility. And what I found is that so we go out and most of these short films are being shot in 2 days. We do a group of interviews in 1 day, and then the second day we're shooting B-roll, and that's about all we have the budget for. But we nevertheless are getting archival footage, additional visuals, different ways, stock material. So what I do on my end is I will label a folder with a particular naming convention so that I have it on the main edit drive in my office, and then I will send that folder to the editor. So the editor now has an identical folder that he then categorizes in his structure of the way that the project is set up. And that's worked really great, you know. And the key thing here is Blip costs nothing. Blip is simply an FTP kind of file transfer service. And then so we just delivered a second season of this series. The editor now has all of the same media that I have on my hard drive. We also have two backup hard drives. I see every editor is saying everything needs to be triple backed up. And I learned that lesson the hard way a long time ago. And that's just worked out very well. Everybody's got the same media. The graphics people have the same folder if they need to work with that particular folder. You know, sometimes there's an additional editor, or we have to pass the project on to an editor because they have another gig and they can't work on it anymore. And that's been fairly seamless in terms of, you know, now I'm just talking about the movement of media. You know, I could talk about the challenges of producing a series, but we're going overtime, Doug, so I won't do that.
About to go overtime. We're not quite there yet.
Yeah. So that was my only tip.
That's your
Hey,
only
Larry,
tip,
I got a question.
Sure.
Larry,
Yeah.
how many gigs can you send over that FTP?
It's unlimited.
Unreal.
So I've
great.
sent as much as 600 gigabytes.
Wow.
Using that utility. Now,
And
the
it's pretty
caveat is
fast?
what's that?
It's pretty fast?
Well, there you go. You're going to address my next comment. I actually, before I start working with a freelancer, I want to make sure they have a fast connection. Because sometimes these guys have like painfully slow connections, and that just doesn't work for me. So I kind of request editors to tell me what kind of bandwidth they have. Because some of these file transfers can happen real quick. You know, 300 megabits per second, 400 megabits per second. And, you know, it works out fine. You know, it really has worked out fine. And I probably spent $3,000 on Massive on the previous season. And I've now spent zero this season moving media around. Now, if it gets past a terabyte, then I usually will send an SSD drive to an editor. When it gets past a certain, you know, amount of gigabytes, I just say, forget it. I'm just going to send you a drive. But I've only had to do that a handful of times for this second season.
Yeah.
So it really works pretty well. Anyway, free is
Yeah.
always good, right? I think everybody can agree on that.
Yeah. Larry, you bring up something important that I wanted to throw out there.
Sure.
We've talked a lot about like what works, what's the, you know, what advice and what and tips have worked for you. You mentioned like what doesn't work for you, you know, having a slow transfer. You know, I'm dealing with that now, trying to move some footage off an old drive onto like a new Samsung drive, and it's like it literally said 15 days to download.
Oh God.
I thought, it's not going to work well. Still trying to figure that out. But I'd be curious to hear, and you know, this can go in the chat too, like what doesn't work? What have you found like was like the most problematic aspect of working virtually?
It's mainly, and somebody was commenting on this in the chat, is mainly when you're getting towards a fine cut and a final cut. You know, anything, you know, I generally break it up into assembly, radio cut, rough cut, fine cut, and then polish. So I have like 5 steps that I go through. I probably could do less steps if I was doing in-person editing. It's been an adjustment over time. So I would say that's the biggest challenge is that, you know, it's great to be in a mind meld with an editor. And, you know, I've gotten to that point with a lot of these freelancers that I work with, but it's still a challenge as you're getting to really fine tuning things. So I don't like that, you know, so like somebody put in the chat, use your mileage so you can work together in person. And I kind of agree with that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I threw that out to everybody, by the way, not just Larry. You know, what
Yeah.
is the biggest challenge for you in working this way? Yeah, raise your hand or in the chat. Ty, then Mabel again. You know what? I'm going to go jump to Joanne because she hasn't had her hand raised yet. But then we'll go back, Mabel and Gil.
All right. This is actually continuing off of Shelley's thing. and a little bit of what we just said a second ago. This situation actually happened to me yesterday. A guy on client side came to me and he was like, look, we're working with his editor for this huge masterclass edit. They're not delivering. They're starting to become angry, all this kind of stuff. And it reminded me with editors where what's the best way as producers to work with editors and editors to work with producers in terms of making something where if it's not working down the line, or if someone becomes a bit aggravated that, it can't fall apart, or if it needs to be separated, that there can be an easy transition of editors, basically. Like, have you guys worked with these kind of situations before?
Yeah, it can be problematic for sure. Yeah, be curious to hear anybody on that. By the way, I think we're sort of at the limit of like how many people we can hands raised at this point, just because we are running over. So, Joanne.
Yeah, Mark's question about putting something on YouTube from the D word about what we do, that might be difficult, but what we could do is put a list of equipment that we use so that first-time filmmakers will know what cameras we use, what sound equipment we use, what lighting equipment we use. Not that we're promoting any particular product, but just say, I use this and this and this, and it's worked well for me. I've also learned from another group that I'm with that's learning all about AI, that if you put in a prompt and ask it, what kind of equipment should I use to make an independent documentary film, it will come up with a list of equipment. And then if you ask it, what does this equipment do? It will tell you everything about the equipment. Because I think for those of us who are just on their first or second film, whether we're editing remotely or not, we still get confused in the physical equipment that we're using. Not so much the thought about what the story is, but the physical equipment that we're using, what we're using to edit, what we're using to shoot, what we're using for sound. So I think if you find that either through AI or we put something like that in the D word, it would be helpful for everybody.
Well, we already have it in a sense in the D word, Joanne. We have the cinematography topic on the D word where people ask all the time about certain pieces of equipment. I mean, over and over, people ask, I'm about to start shooting something, what's a great affordable camera, and what, and we have a search engine as well within the topics. So you could, ask about a certain piece of equipment, and you'll get several people coming back and talk about their experiences on it.
Well, there you go. And I'm sure a lot of people on this call who are new to it didn't know about that feature of the D word. So now you've opened our minds to something else on the D word.
We're expanding people's minds. And notice we do everything we can to avoid extra work to create videos for YouTube. We do, we record these things. And, occasionally, like I did a couple of years ago, I was reporting for the D word up at Hot Docs, and we had the great idea that instead of doing the usual blogging, I would do like a video. And thus I lost my virginity in virtual editing with Joy. So thank you for that, Joy. Was it as good for you as it was for me?
Wow, that's awkward. Yeah, it was. Yeah, go check it out on the YouTube because
do we have the link?
It's on the D Words YouTube.
Yeah, Jim, did you ever find the link to that? Good.
I think it's also on my website, joyeditsdocs.com.
Oh, there you go.
So
it's a nice piece. It actually turned out really well, and
yeah, it was fun. It was like a little mini Doug Block doc. It was just it was a fun little project. It truly was.
It was me. Yeah, it was all about me. But that's what you do when you make personal documentaries. Okay, let's see. Mabel and Gil, take us home. Our last two shares.
Last shares about how best to work with directors, producers, how the thing works. So I've been mainly an editor, but also a director or producer of my own work over years. And so it's been great to learn from both perspectives. One thing that is a take what away from me is always like, I mean, the intentionality and the transparency and the building of trust from the beginning and throughout the process, like reaffirming those in gentle ways that really, I think, gives more certainty to either way, actually, right? Because you as an editor, you try to submit your best work, but you may not know necessarily how it would land. But if you're building language together, like other people said, right? Like building language together, agreeing to have a language. Uh, Actually, meet like in the last two projects I had worked on, we actually met in person first. Either they came to me, I went to them, either way. We sat together. In one case, we have a couple of days, another case, it was 3 days. So like we call it tuning and aligning our beings, our what we wanted, they wanted, and we wanted together bring out of the film. In one case, I also worked first in a sample reel, and it was testing the waters for them, and in a way, also testing the waters for me, like they want to work with them, right? And going from sample reel to eventually edit the film. Um, so what am I going to say with that? And so in the communication and in the in-person thing, also the very, uh, it's good to be able to, if you can, and I think I would suggest that to also get together in person at certain milestones, at certain stages of the film. Maybe because they're coming to the city where you are or you're going there. So you always finding an excuse to be in person as much as possible. Or maybe they have screenings from other film. Like I went recently to a screening that they have a film locally, and we got together, and it was a way to be outside of the edit room, but also building connection and community. So something to think about, right? Like in general, like how do we build that connection of it all? And I would do whatever it takes. I need to go and see that filmmakers at this time. I would do it, and I would just carve out my time to do that. And ideally, it's covered, or maybe we find a way to do it. So basically, that. I forgot what was the other thing that was going to take, but that was a long
You're
time.
going
So
to
I
talk
think it's
about
enough.
you're going to talk about the D Words fundraiser, Mabel, and why.
Oh, yes.
Just a reminder before, as people are leaving, that we, as I mentioned at the beginning of this, we are free. We've always been free for our 26 years, and we do a fundraiser every December to keep us afloat for another year. So if you find value in this, we would really appreciate a donation. Jim or Julie or someone will put a direct link to the Film Collaborative page, our fiscal sponsor, where you can make a contribution. But we would really appreciate it. So thanks for that, Mabel. And Gil, you're the last man standing.
Wow.
Give us your
That's an honor.
final words. Yes. And save the chat, folks. Save the chat on your way out. It was really lively and informative. Yeah, Gil.
Okay. All right. Just three quick things. First of all, to address what Ty brought up, which is, what happens if you have a difference in opinion with an editor and you have to part ways for whatever reason, and we don't like to talk about it, but it happens. It's happened to me. I've also, been on the end where I'm coming in on a project, after another editor has started it. So, first of all, you we're working for you guys. You hire us, so it's your prerogative for whatever, reason. But I like to think that I organize my projects, in such like a clear way, that whatever editor comes in, they can just pick it up and start, I mean, everyone does things a little differently, but there is sort of like this universal accepted way to organize things. And since I've been on both ends of the of the experience, yeah, I always like to pass things off, and I rarely get people coming back with questions.
Boy, that's a whole other session we could be doing on organizing
Yeah,
footage.
yeah, absolutely. Naming conventions and folder structures and all that.
Yeah.
And as far as communication, as to terminology and things like, I mean, Larry had a really clear way of describing the different phases. And I think as long as you, at the outset of a project, agree on what those terms mean, assembly, radio edit, rough cut, fine cut, and so on. I think it should be pretty clear. There shouldn't be any confusion. I can't remember who it was, but somebody mentioned getting expecting maybe an assembly and getting like a really fleshed out fine cut with music and B-roll. And, that should all be somewhat clear at the beginning of a project. And there are like, some kind of like accepted terms that we all should be using. And then as far as collaborative editing is, meaning like, how do we get together on a project, working remotely, like what are the expectations and so on. I mean, I've worked on everything from just, it's myself and a director, and that's it. There's just two people. Working on Zoom with like a Dropbox, like a $10 Dropbox account. To working on I just got off like a large scale studio narrative with a huge team of, 6 editors and a post supervisor and movie stars. And I mean, that was.
Which one was it, Gil?
I was on the edit team of Bradley Cooper's third film, which comes out today.
Oh, I saw it. It was really good.
Oh, you saw it? Oh, cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw it last week.
Yeah. So I just, that we wrapped post in October, and that was like almost a year-long project. And there's security issues there. There are a lot of things to consider. There's VFX teams and sound and color grade and so on. And then there's a director who is a movie star who's all over the world all the time. And so, there are very robust systems in place that are like tested, in order to make sure that we can edit with him, no matter where he lives in New York, but he was all over the place. But I will say that regardless, and I know this is a remote editing session, I mean, regardless, being in person at some point in the process, ideally ideally like you kind of check in, but definitely towards the end is ideal. I mean, you there's no substitute for that. With short form, it's different. I mean, I've edited, 100 short form projects fully remotely, and it's the timeline's pretty short, and you have to kind of work fast, and the budgets are usually smaller. But if you're able to, even on an independent documentary budget, if you can just, and you're working remotely, if you can budget in at least some time at the end to be in the same room together, I think there really isn't any substitute for that. And it really,
that, and it seems having an assistant editor is very important. Gil, were you at that screening at the DGA last week?
No, I wasn't.
One of the editors was there, and Bradley Cooper was teasing about being overdressed for it. So
that was Charlie. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was in Barcelona.
He talked about like a very compressed edit schedule.
Yeah. Well, we got fast tracked for the New York Film Festival, so we had to expand the edit team and bring in more people and then edit faster.
Yeah. Anyway, really, congratulations on it. It was a really fun film. Yeah. All right, folks, we are at the end of our session.